Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to show you how to do an EBQ for AP Psych. We've done these in class a few times. I just want to provide you with a kind of permanent review for you to refer to if you want to review how to do an EBQ and best practices and things like that. Alright, so EBQ is about 15% of your AP test score. I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's about 16-17% of your AP test score. So a little bit more than 15%. It's equally as important as the AAQ. Whereas for the AAQ you get 25 minutes, for the EBQ you get 45 minutes. So it's going to take a little bit longer because it does require a little bit more reading and writing. So what should you do? So 45 minutes, first thing you want to do is read through the sources. So the instructions are up here. You're going to see similar sources on your EBQ, and you're going to want to fill in your answers wherever it tells you to. I believe on test day you're going to have a box for A, B, and C together, but right now they're on separate pages. But on AP test day they'll be on the same page, I believe. I've never taken an AP Psych test since they've redesigned it, so I'm not sure how it's going to be laid on your screen, but this is what I've been told, that it's A, B, and C all right next to each other. So the first box here is going to kind of tell you what your claim is going to be based around, like the topic you're going to be looking at, and you can see it right here. Using the sources provided, develop and justify an argument about the best time for school to start in students' grades 6 through 12. And then your first part is to develop a claim, a defensible claim that responds to this question. All right, so read this first so you know what to be looking for. Alright, so we're looking for evidence that supports a good school start time for students in grades 6 through 12. And here we see our sources. So what you'll do is you'll read through your sources. Each source is kind of set up the same, very similar to a source you would see on an AAQ. So it's going to have things like that. You really want to pay close attention in an EBQ to this part, the results and discussion. This is going to have lots of evidence, most likely, that's going to support your claim. Alright. So keep in mind that, but you do want to read the entire EBQ document, but really focus on this part, the results and discussion. You want to read through each thing. It could be, each source could be an experiment, a correlational study, a naturalistic observation, surveys, meta-analysis, case study. It could be anything and all of the above, honestly. Again, they can vary in length, but you want to keep that in mind as you read through these EBQ sources. And there you go, there's the third source there. This is just a statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics. You must assume that all three sources are good, scientifically speaking, that they have valid, truthful information. But you're not going to always see all three sources align as far as like what they're saying. Some sources may say one argument or one thing, and another source may say another. So your job as the writer is to kind of develop and find evidence that supports the same claim. Don't put a claim that isn't supported by evidence, and make sure before you write your claim that you have evidence to support your claim. So a claim here would be very simple, and again, I didn't read these sources here recently, but let's say the best school start time for students in grades 6 through 12. And again, you always just want to repeat the question when you write your claim. That's a standard tactic, if I'm correct, right? So the best school start time for students in grades 6 through 12 would be a time that occurs, let's say, after 9 a.m. Now again, I did not have time to read all of these. I'm making a video to instruct you. I would not say 9 a.m. if it wasn't supported in the sources, at least two pieces of evidence from the sources. So I want to make sure that there is evidence for that. So I'm seeing earlier than 8:30 here, things like that. So again, you really want to take the time, make sure you're finding evidence to support your claim. If you read through the sources and you need to change this, you can. You're typing this out. So if you need to change it to 10 a.m., so be it. If you can maybe make it 8 a.m., so be it. You can always go back and change this before you submit the test. All right. So that's that's the minimum that you have to say for your claim, but you do have to make an argument here. You can add this theory. This is supported with evidence concerning the psychological concepts of, and if you really want to work ahead and kind of say what psych concepts you're seeing in the evidence, maybe like memory consolidation and REM sleep, or like let's change that to long-term potentiation. You know, you can do that, but that's not necessary. You can also say something like students that go to schools that start after 9 a.m. tend to show higher educational achievement and better behaviors. You can write things like that too if you want to, but again, don't write something that is not in the evidence. Only say things in your claim that you can support with evidence later on. So again, you can write things like that, but if you just want to do the bare minimum and maybe come back to this later, this is fine. This will score you a point as long as it's defensible, all right? Because you do answer the prompt here, all right? So moving on to Part B. Part B and Part C are going to be identical. You just have to kind of watch what you write. So you have to write 2 paragraphs in these boxes here. So the first box here will be evidence you're citing. So you can cite evidence 2 ways. So let's say I want to support my claim about school start time. So I would first write according to source 1, students that start school at a later start time after 9 a.m. Tend to show, and then cite the evidence. You can quote the evidence if you want to. Just make sure you kind of explain what the evidence is saying. So like if the evidence discusses like correlational coefficient or p-value or things like that, make sure you briefly explain that. You can also do, according to studies done on school start time, and then cite your evidence here, and then at the end of the paragraph you can cite it by doing that. So that's another way you can kind of cite evidence. So you can do either one of those, as it says right here. Either one of those is fine. Just make sure you're citing evidence that again supports your claim and supports a later school start time, as you said there. So you do that. That's your first paragraph, all right? Your second paragraph is in explaining how the evidence supports your claim. So if we go back to source 1, our second paragraph will be, in source 1, we saw that students that had a later school start time had higher GPAs. This evidence supports my claim because students that have higher GPAs tend to do better in school, have better career academic career outcomes, and are more likely to get into and attend college. All right. If you saw that in the evidence as well, you can cite it, but that's just kind of common knowledge. You want to make sure you're explaining your source evidence here and why it kind of makes sense. So what are you seeing in the evidence? What does the evidence tell you? You might find as you're writing this that the evidence you picked out is not good. This source 1, for example, I'm looking at it, and again, I'm filming a video while I'm doing this, and I haven't looked at this source in a while. I'm not seeing a maybe specific enough information for me. It does talk about GPAs and things like that here, but maybe it's not the best source. Therefore, you might need to go back and change your claim, and then maybe pick the other 2 sources to use. So you want to make sure you're finding evidence that supports your claim as you're doing it. All right. So, and again, we're still on Part B here, the second part. In my first paragraph, I'm just citing evidence. In my second paragraph, I'm explaining how the evidence supports the claim. The last part of Part B is to find a psych concept that we learned in class and apply it to the situation. One psychology concept that may apply to this study would be the example of memory consolidation. Memory consolidation is the concept that explains that when we get plenty and sufficient amounts of deep sleep, our memories tend to form in more permanent ways. Sorry for the typos here. And we are more likely to have stronger, more durable memories if we get enough sleep. All right, so I'm typing that out there. I'm defining the psych concept I want to apply to the situation, memory consolidation. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's even okay if you can't think of the exact psych concept. If you define it perfectly and explain it perfectly, and even though you can't remember what it is, we are instructed as AP Psych readers to maybe give you the point. So do your best to kind of remember and think of good psych concepts to use, even if you can't remember the name of the term. So if I were to take out memory consolidation and I were to say, in psychology we learn that, and just kind of go on with my definition, I good chance I'll get the point. So I recommend you do that. In this study, this concept is proven because students that get larger amounts of sleep tend to have higher GPAs, meaning they have stronger, more durable memories that can help them do better in school, specifically around memorizing facts and pieces of information. All right. So again, what I did here is, just to kind of recap what I did in this box, I cited a piece of evidence. Actually, I didn't do it, but you can assume I did. I would just pick something from this source that proves that people that got more sleep, that got longer amounts of sleep, or had a later school start time did better. So I would cite that piece of evidence, and then explain that piece of evidence, which again, I didn't cite, so that's maybe kind of hazy there. But the second part of this is explaining the source with my psych concept, memory consolidation. So you have to do three things. You cite a source, you then make a new paragraph, you explain the source in that second paragraph, and then you find a psych concept that explains what you're witnessing, or is very closely related to what you're witnessing, or is somehow the cause or effect of what you're witnessing. All right, so you want to kind of think, kind of have those psych concepts down. All right, so that's what you do for the second part. Then for the last part, you just do the same thing. You pick a different source. So in source 2, and I would do the same thing, but for source 2 now, all right, a little bit longer, a little bit more information there. I make for part C, you kind of do the same thing. You make your next paragraph evidence, and then for the final paragraph, you do the same thing, where you explain the source to evidence you cited, and then finally you think of a psych concept. A psychology concept that explains this, these findings would be ... And you think of a psych concept that is related to what you're witnessing. REM sleep, long-term potentiation, things like that, things that can kind of like help you figure out what's going on. If you look in the directives up here, it says perspective, theory, concept, or research finding. It can be something you didn't learn in this class that is still a psychologically valid psych concept, right? That is true, and it can even be a psychology concept. I would do that as a last resort. We were instructed this summer really to kind of avoid giving credit to psych perspectives, at least for the EBQ that I graded. So I would avoid like listing cognitive psychology, for example. I would try to think of something you learned in class that's like a vocab term. Confirmation bias, deep sleep, N3 sleep, sleep stages, memory consolidation, long-term potentiation, any of your memory systems, long-term memory, those would be much more likely to score, even if it's similarly related. The only things you can't put down are vocab terms that are directly stated in the source. So if you see, for example, long-term potentiation in one of these sources, you cannot use it. All right, so keep that in mind. So again, to quickly recap, for part 1, for A, 1 sentence to 2 sentence claim. For parts 2 and 3, for parts B and C, you're going to write 2 paragraphs each. The first paragraph is simply evidence that you're citing that supports your claim. You're then going to explain in the next paragraph of B and C how that evidence supports your claim. So tie it to your claim, explain how the evidence you cited supports your claim. And then lastly, in that same second paragraph, you're going to think of a psych concept that supports what you see in the source and the whole situation at large. It can be related, it can be the cause of effect, somehow related to what's going on, but it must be kind of tied to what you're seeing in these psychology sources. All right. Just a quick reminder, I'll link in the video here an example of what you should be seeing and writing. I showed you this in class. This is what a EBQ looks like when it comes to learning and behavior in class. And then again, I'll also link in the YouTube video my EBQ and AAQ rubrics. So make sure you're kind of following those and making sure you're listening to those. All right, that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.